Richard Dawkins, The Extended Phenotype, The Long Reach of the Gene. Have you ever thought about the relationship between organisms and their genes? Welcome to the groundbreaking book, The Extended Phenotype, The Long Reach of the Gene, by Richard Dawkins, where he invites us to shift our perspective from the individual organism to the gene as the focus of evolution. Dawkins challenges traditional understanding and broadens the view of what makes up the phenotype. Come along and learn about replicators, vehicles, extended phenotypes, and the concept of selfish genes. Discover thought-provoking examples that will make you rethink the nature of evolution and the fundamental question of what it means to fight for survival.
Selfish genes in evolution. The popular concept of the survival of the fittest has often been summarized by the observations of Charles Darwin and the selfish organisms that fight for survival. However, when we shift our focus to genes instead of organisms, we see the emergence of selfish genes. By changing our perspective, we open the door to new questions about genetic grouping within organisms. This summary delves deeper into this concept and its implications for evolutionary biology. The truth about genes. There is a common myth called the gene myth that suggests having specific genes determines a person's fate. However, genes are not the only determining factor in a person's traits, and environmental factors play a significant role. Although certain genes may indicate a tendency towards certain characteristics, they do not guarantee them. People tend to misunderstand biology jargon, which leads to false beliefs about genes being deterministic. Our genes do influence us, but they cannot determine our fate. Suboptimal traits in evolution. Evolution doesn't always lead to optimal traits due to time lags, available genetic variation, and conflicting individual or group priorities. The theory of evolution suggests that organisms develop traits that optimize their survival in specific environments. However, this may not always be the case. Time lags, available genetic variation, and conflicting individual or group priorities can cause suboptimal traits. For instance, armadillos can roll up into a ball to defend themselves against predators, but this defense mechanism becomes obsolete in an environment with automobiles. Moreover, available genetic variation can limit the possibility of developing optimal traits. While many vertebrates evolved to have wings instead of arms, no vertebrate ever evolved to have multiple arms, despite the potential benefits. Additionally, optimal traits for an individual may not be ideal for the group, or vice versa. Sometimes, egoistic and altruistic behaviors can conflict with each other. For instance, while an egoistic approach may help a bison attract a mate, it may backfire when facing a group threat from predators. This suggests that the adaptationist approach to understanding evolution has its limitations. While Darwin's ideas were revolutionary, they do not provide a complete picture. In summary, the pursuit of optimal traits in evolution is not always straightforward, and there are many holes in this approach. Evolutionary manipulation. Organisms do not always act in their own best interest for survival. The theory of maximizing fitness is challenged by cases of manipulation for the benefit of another organism. The angler fish is an example of a manipulator that attracts small fish with a deceptive lure, and the small fish evolved to work in the angler's best interest, not their own. This relationship leads to changes in both organisms to maintain the manipulation. The manipulator faces greater pressure to adapt, and changes in the manipulated continue to benefit the manipulator's fitness instead of its own. Decoding replicators. Replicators are anything that lasts because copies are made of it. They are of two types, active and passive, and each has two subtypes, germline and dead-end replicators. Germline replicators can be copied infinitely, while dead-end replicators can be copied a finite number of times. Memes also act as replicators that can get copied and reintroduced with mutations. Genes as replicators and organisms as vehicles. In The Selfish Gene, Richard Dawkins argues that genes are replicators, and organisms are vehicles. While genes replicate through natural selection, organisms serve as their preservers and propagators. Genetic mutations occur during the replication of genes, which are then passed down to the next generation. By contrast, organisms do not pass down acquired characteristics, they carry the replicators and serve as their vehicles. The daughter will be a vehicle for the mother's genes and any genetic mutations that may occur. Biology classes may traditionally lump organisms and genes together as interchangeable, but Dawkins argues that genes and organisms are entirely different categories. The old way of looking at things is inaccurate, as one cannot move freely between genes and organisms. However, the same rules can apply to organisms and communities of organisms since they're both vehicles. The book delves into an accurate theory of evolution that recognizes the difference between replicators and vehicles. The real drivers of evolution. Evolution is not driven by organisms but by genes competing with each other. The process of natural selection is about genetic replicators outcompeting each other through the phenotypic effects they create in organisms. Outlaws are genes that promote their own survival even at the expense of most other genes in the genome. Modifiers are genes that can come to the rescue by banding together to outnumber and overrule the outlaws. In the end, it's the genes that shape the evolution of life. The purpose of superfluous DNA. Human biology contains more DNA than necessary for proper functioning, leading to the belief that the extra DNA has no purpose. However, a gene-centric perspective suggests that the superfluous DNA ensures its own survival and replication. Biologists' organism-centric view of evolution hinders their understanding of this concept. An analogy is made with alien biologists misunderstanding human security measures due to their utopian perspective. Recognizing that DNA is not solely for building and maintaining an organism's body allows for a greater understanding of its purpose. What does fitness mean in evolution? The term fitness has different meanings in the field of evolution, leading to confusion and erroneous beliefs. Darwin's original use of the term referred to organisms' capacity to survive, but it now includes an organism's success in reproducing and passing on genes. Additionally, inclusive fitness considers the survival of close relatives who share an individual's genes. Biologists often use the term to promote the idea that individual organisms are the primary beneficiaries of genetic adaptations. However, understanding the selfish gene rather than the selfish organism is crucial to comprehending evolution accurately. The phenomenon of extended phenotype. The understanding of the phenotype goes beyond the individual organism, as this article highlights. The phenotype is what gives us our observable characteristics, and genes combine with an organism's environment to make this up. The article provides examples such as a caddisfly species whose larvae build nests to illustrate how colors of the nests are a result of the larvae's genes, and the surrounding environments of an organism can also be part of its extended phenotype. A beaver dam is a perfect example of a joint extended phenotype, recognizing expressions made by multiple organisms. Understanding organisms' extended phenotype. An organism's extended phenotype is related to factors that influence its survival or reproduction. A pigeon's nest qualifies as part of its extended phenotype as it helps ensure the survival of its offspring. However, the scratch marks on the ground while gathering sticks do not affect the pigeon's survival and hence are not part of its phenotype. When a snail carries a fluke parasite, its shell grows thicker to help the fluke and its offspring thrive. This thickened shell is an example of a shared expression of the snail's and the fluke's phenotype. The extended phenotype can be another organism's living tissue in some cases. The selfish gene and the Bruce effect. In this part of the book, the author concludes by circling back to the Necker cube analogy used earlier to illustrate the traditional view and gene-centric view in biology. The Bruce effect, discovered in a study involving mice, is used as a final example to explain the central theorem of the extended phenotype. In the traditional view, the male mouse manipulates the female mouse to terminate a pregnancy from another male mouse to maximize its own fitness. However, in the gene-centric view, the phenotype expressed in the male mouse's scent causes the termination of pregnancy in the female mouse, serving the gene's survival and replication in the next generation. In summary, an organism's behavior serves to maximize the survival of the genes that create the behavior, even when those genes are not part of the organism's genome.
In conclusion, the extended phenotype challenges the conventional perspective of organisms being the center of evolutionary adaptation. By exploring a gene-centric view, Dawkins opens up new avenues of understanding and presents fascinating examples of genes, selfish behavior, and the phenomenal concept of extended phenotypes. We've seen how our genes are the active agents of evolution, and our behavior may serve the survival of our genes across generations. So, the next time you ponder about evolution and survival, remember the Necker cube and contemplate how the gene-centric perspective can shed new light on the mysteries of the natural world.